Good morning and good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the webinar titled 5 Reasons to Modernize Your Approach to Enterprise Content Management, presented by Newgen Software, a leading provider of content services, digital process automation, and customer communication management platform with a multitude of implementations across the globe. I am Gunjan Kalita, and I shall be your host and the moderator for this webinar. Today, we have Cheryl McKinnon, Principal Analyst from Forrester Research, and Anurag Shah, Newgen's AVP and Head of Digital Products, as our speakers. At the end of the presentation, we'll be having a question and answer session. We request you to type your questions in the question window of your GoToWebinar panel anytime throughout the webinar. I shall take them up at the end with our experts. And with that, I hand it over to Cheryl.
So thank you again for the invitation to present. As mentioned, my name is Cheryl McKinnon. I'm a principal analyst here at Forrester Research, covering a fairly broad segment of the overall content management and content platform market. So what we're going to dive into over the next little while, a few key topics. First, what are the characteristics of a modern content platform? Why do we want to make sure that we're thinking about the future and preparing to modernize, including potential migration efforts? We're also going to look at the 5 key reasons we think it's important to start to modernize your enterprise content management strategy and technology stack. We'll take a look at some key recommendations, summary, and then the host will open it up for Q&A. So let's begin. So let's talk about the characteristics of a modern content platform and why we need to think about the future. Here at Forrester, we've been watching the evolution of the market segment historically known as enterprise content management. And as we've seen the rise of cloud-based services, modern architectures, vendors with a path of innovation, including automation, analytics, we see that we've now shifted into a modern architecture stack, what we're calling a content platform. So how does that differ from the enterprise content management that we've known for 20, 25 years? Well, the first thing is that we're looking at platforms that are much more modular, much more flexible, designed to meet the needs of not only line of business professionals, but the architects and developers that are there to support them in their modernization efforts. Let's just take a look at this particular outline here in terms of the components that we look for when we're looking at a modern content platform. Right at the bottom, we see that we need these foundational content services. This is really the nuts and bolts of how we manage and organize our business documents and all of the related context and data and process around it. These include things like library and repository services, security and search capabilities, metadata so we can organize and automate things. The next layer up are those collection of content services that really help us serve specific use cases or requirements. For example, the collaborative content services. These are the capabilities we need to empower our information workers to be more productive, to share information securely, and make sure we can support programs and projects, cases, or customers, interact with our digital documents. The second category of these content services are what we've been calling transactional content services, and those are the process automation capabilities such as workflow, process orchestration, forms, and capture so we can extract intelligence from our documents and automate essential business activities. The third category is what we call federation and integration services. And these are all the tools we need to integrate with our other essential enterprise applications, whether that's a CRM system or an HR management system, and the ability to reach out into other applications and even other repositories to manage and consume and access documents, building in more that one-stop shop for information workers to go to get the data, the content, and the context that they need to do their job. And the newest addition to this set of content services is what we've been calling intelligent content services. In other words, machine learning capabilities, advanced analytics, artificial intelligence. This has been a major area of innovation for vendors over the last few years, helping organizations fast track and automate things like large-scale categorization and classification, having the machine learning apply things like metadata or retention policies on documents, automated language translations, or even smart extraction of data and entities out of static document types. Now, all of these services and capabilities are great, but we then need our architects and developers to assemble them, put them together, and offer meaningful applications to the users that we're serving. So we're also seeing in the market those vendors investing in these modern platforms also begin to offer no-code design tools, so templating capabilities, so those designers or subject matter experts can deliver simple applications. Also, the need to serve developers with code samples, frameworks, other sets of developer tools. Now, the end user, those line of business buyers, they want those end applications, whether those are employee file management tools, perhaps a loan origination or accounts payable, quality management systems, or whatever other use case you need to serve. So we do see that the power of these modern content platforms is really the value that we can deliver to our employees and customer-facing buyers. Just to dive a little bit more deeply into that, at Forrester, we've been looking at these key characteristics as we evolve from classic ECM to these flexible modern platforms. And this is just another visualization of how we further break down those categories of content services. So we've kind of painted the picture of what the future can look like. Let's talk about why we need to modernize our ECM strategy and investments. A few drivers here, and we'll step through each one in a little bit of detail over the next few minutes. First, we do see that content platforms have emerged as one of those essential elements for business continuity and to be a resilient enterprise. Second, we see that AI and other types of intelligent content services are now maturing enough where we can truly transform some of the ways that we deliver content management applications. Third, we see that organizations increasingly want to embrace what I've been calling their extended enterprise. In other words, do we have the right modern platforms to be able to add applications that are customer-facing or perhaps serve other critical outside parties like partners, suppliers, vendors? Fourth, we know that this sustained interest and obligation to support home and remote workers will continue to fast-track content into cloud architectures. And the fifth and final reason to think about modernizing your strategy is because we're starting to see new types of documents coming in the work environment, and that will compel a new way of managing these new kind of document and data types. So let's talk about each of these for a moment or two. First reason, content platforms have emerged as a key component for business continuity. Now, many of us have lived through 2020 and have developed new work habits out of necessity. Many of our organizations have had required work from home or other kinds of distributed or remote work environments. But at the same time, we need those tools to serve those customer-facing and frontline workers in ever more compelling ways. Here at Forrester, we actually did some research early in 2020 looking at what are some of those essential technologies to help organizations not only manage through the pandemic response, but even help employees as they have various forms of a safe return to work. We looked at categories such as risk and crisis management technologies, customer experience technologies, health and safety technologies, and employee experience technologies. And we highlighted those that were most important. Now, the good news is that in the world of content management and communications, several of these elements came up as these essential technologies. For example, transactional content management, things like process automation, digital or electronic forms, e-signatures, for example. These help us move some of those formerly in-person or manual transactions into a digital-first way of working. These are the tools that support organizations needing to do that. As well, In the category of employee experience, we see that cloud content platforms and team collaboration solutions also are identified as essential solutions for helping organizations in pandemic response. The ability for information workers to continue to exchange information, share information, find those essential documents to help them continue their work practices, even if they're relegated to home or other kind of remote offices. So a modern content strategy, another reason to think about modernization, is to make sure that we can continue to work in this distributed environment. We also know that information workers spend about a quarter of their time creating, finding, or reading documents. This is from our workforce survey data that Forrester looks at every year. And so we need to know that we are, again, making sure that these information workers who spend their time working with clients are able to continue their core operations, even in a disrupted work environment. This is also important because as we look around the content management market, the two top drivers in terms of why people invest in content management technologies, and I think another important factor about the modernization discussion, is that we still need to digitize business processes and we still need to ensure we're enabling our employees to be productive. These are two of the top drivers that we've seen even in the pre-pandemic era. And I think as our response to remote work has shown, paper is a weak link in terms of operational continuity. We did some research in those early months of COVID response, and many organizations revealed that essentially many of their core business activities, those processes broke literally overnight. Anything that required person-to-person interaction, paper-based transactions, wet signatures, all of these activities came to a halt, and this impacted negatively business operations. So we need to think beyond that. But just as mentioned, according to some of our survey data, when we polled ECM decision makers, the reasons that they were making these investments were digitization of process, employee productivity, and of course there, number 3, the need to remain or become better compliant with the laws and regulations affecting your jurisdiction or the industry that you're in. Let's talk about the second reason to think about a modernization strategy. It's because AI and other types of intelligent content services are now ready to transform your ECM investments. Some of the biggest challenges that organizations continue to face today is what I call sprawl, and that's the proliferation of the file shares and ungoverned content repositories that are out there in many organizations. This continues to be a top challenge year over year. And I think part of the problem in solving that challenge is that the volume really is very difficult for humans alone, for employees alone to deal with, to look at, to sort through. So we need to look at technology to help us with some of that heavier lifting. So we need to start planning for the adoption of things like automated categorization tool, analysis tools to be able to help us with some of these long-standing challenges around coping with the volume of documents. When we asked our ECM decision makers, what's your roadmap for bringing some of these automation and analytic tools into your content management environment, we see that over the last 2 to 3 years, there's been a very interesting change in roadmap. Back in 2017, we saw that a number of organizations were interested in bringing these technologies in, but they had no firm plans to do so. Similarly, here in 2020, we asked the same question, and 65% now actually had this planned as part of a 1 to 2 year roadmap. So we've gone from interest to action in just 3 years. When we ask further, what do you want to do with some of these automation and intelligent tools? As you see, some of the more kind of core capabilities are challenges of what we're trying to serve. The automation of the categorization of documents, the extraction of data from static document types, the ability to identify and find sensitive information, such as personally identifiable information locked inside documents. So a lot of those issues relating to sprawl and the volume of documents that we can't handle alone. When we look at some of the emerging and kind of high adoption newer technologies in the market, the two that have the biggest level of adoption so far in content management programs include RPA, robotic process automation, as well as AI technologies coming from public cloud providers such as the Google, the Azure, the AWS. This is where we're seeing kind of the highest level of adoption of some of these new and emerging technologies. Another interesting fact is that we see that as content management platforms modernize their architecture and become infused with various intelligence services, we're starting to see the rise of a market overall around AI. Some of my colleagues at Forrester are predicting this could be a $37 billion market by 2025. And if we think about the enterprise applications, including content management, that represents 6 billion of that market, meaning that there's more value-added solutions and packages and integrations from AI infusion into these content management platforms that will increase the value of these products over time. Let's talk about the third reason to think about modernization. And that's the embrace of what I've been calling the extended enterprise. In other words, how do we serve the business to business or the business to consumer or even citizen use cases out there? Again, with an eye to a more digital first way of working, where can we streamline our interactions with our trusted external parties, our customers, suppliers, vendors, maybe the design agencies or law firms that we work with? We're seeing the rise of applications designed for those purposes. Year over year, we've been asking ECM decision makers, well, do you want to serve external users as part of your content management systems? And you see that year over year, the answer has increasingly been yes, from 51% back in 2017 to 70% last year. When we ask further, what are the use cases that you want to be able to address? We saw the number one answer was collaboration with their contractors, agencies, or the consultants that came in to enhance their workforce, followed by secure sharing of customer or citizen documentation, such as statements, forms, or correspondence. With third place, the distribution, that secure, curated information out to partners, things like sales, technical, or marketing materials. So these are some of the top use cases where external stakeholders become active participants in the content retrieval, co-editing, distribution, and so on. We also know from our what we call our workforce survey, so looking at the habits of information workers, that interactions with customers often involve documents. When we asked information workers who serve customers, what do you do? 3 of the responses included reviewing, editing, and collaborating with their customers. We've also started to explore what we call the idea of the content microprocess. We look at this as one of those tasks, one of those process automation capabilities that really helps connect the enterprise with that external party. So perhaps between an insurance company and a new client that they're looking to onboard, or perhaps is filing a claim for the first time. So when we look at this engagement between 2 entities, your enterprise perhaps and one of the customers that you serve, we know that there's often large comprehensive processes running internally, perhaps a 10-step workflow to onboard a new client and open up that first case. So we see that these internal stakeholders design processes to do things like new customer onboarding. Yet on the other side, if you put yourself in the shoes of that client, they may not have a lot of understanding about just how complex some of these processes might be. But what they want to know is, when do I need to submit my forms? When do I need to upload my evidence information? When do I need to provide that signature or identification? And that awareness of where they are in the cycle, are they at step 3 of 5 or 4 of 5? That awareness actually leads to a much more improved customer experience because they understand when they're going to get an answer or have a confirmation sent. And so these workflows that go out and ask that customer for the documents, request those files, is what we're calling that content microprocess. Let's talk about the fourth reason to think about modernization. It's that remote work will continue to fast-track content into cloud services. Now, the content management market overall, as the modernization has happened from classic old architected for on-premises deployments, those classic ECM suites of the past, into more cloud-native or cloud-friendly modular and flexible content platforms. This is something we see continuing to happen even in highly regulated industries. But the path to cloud is not one size fits all. We do see several different types of cloud delivery models, and some have different kinds of advantages or disadvantages over others. But when we surveyed our enterprise content management software decision makers, we saw that there's really almost a very even distribution of how organizations are approaching the cloud. We saw a very even split on those organizations that describe themselves as using a hosted instance, perhaps provided by their preferred public cloud provider or a local data center. 20% had a hosted instance hosted by their vendor themselves, so vendors that do have their own data center. 19% are using a multi-tenant software as a service cloud model. And 21% describe themselves as hybrid, so some kind of mixed environment of on-premises and one or more cloud models. So, we do see that the path to cloud can be a phased approach. In 2021, often spurred by the demands of serving remote and home office workers in pandemic, we do expect to see in 2021 a fast tracking of the move to software as a service delivery models. That became clear as we saw more organizations make that shift out of necessity to serve remote workers. And we need to plan for the future. This whole idea of modernization is really critical right now because, again, according to our data, we see that almost half of the influencers that we surveyed in 2020 expect their organizations to permanently hold a much higher rate of full-time remote employees. So even as we come out of the pandemic response in many regions and cities, companies themselves are now looking at opportunities to move to a more home-based workforce or to downsize some of their real estate assets. So this is setting us up for the future. And again, this does match with some of the data that we have when we asked our content management decision makers last year, what is your overall technology strategy? We saw that for the first time, cloud was at the top of the list. So they're looking to standardize on a content management solution in a cloud delivery model. That became the dominant technology roadmap for the first time over the choice of on-premises. Cloud tools, again, because they're typically a more modern architecture, they have been designed for the needs of external parties and the needs of remote and home office access, typically have a better approach to mobile apps as well. A more modern experience that can be translated into the phone or tablet format to have people interact with documents or approve tasks, when they're in a mobile moment. 46% of decision makers, ECM decision makers, actually have now enabled mobile access to their content management systems. That's actually a nice jump up from previous years. So we do see the path to mobile becoming stronger as well. The fifth and final reason that we're going to highlight today, why we want to think about modernizing our content management strategy, is because we're starting to see the shape of the document itself beginning to change. We're starting to see new document types, new media formats come into the mix, and organizations are trying to think through how do we become more nimble and componentized with the documents that we produce. So some recent research, we do see that as we shift to cloud, we're creating content in new ways. It's not just files that we store on a network drive anymore, but we're collaborating more. We're using rich media. We're recording our meetings, for example, now instead of taking notes. And so the content management platforms that we choose to manage some of these new types of documents and data types also need to be modern and nimble enough to accommodate for them. So if we think about, some of the changes we've seen recently, we know that content, communication, and process will drive our move to more digital business. We need to make sure that we're ready for what's happening in today and into the near-term future. The rise of cloud services for communication and collaboration means we've now got audio, visual, video, threaded discussions that we all need to bring to the mix. We're starting to collaborate and share information quite differently. We also know that a whole range of meeting platforms have basically hit astronomical adoption levels out of sheer necessity since early 2020. And we also need to make sure that we're bringing in the right governance, the right security, retention, governance, perhaps legal discovery capabilities, because as we start recording more of our conversations and our meetings, we know that this is all electronically stored information, which for those of you in industries that have a high degree of litigation, they could all be subject to potential discovery. And we also need to think about the long-term retention. There may be valuable corporate memory, valuable decisions made in some of these conversations that historically we may have in a document format, but now we have as part of a meeting transcript perhaps. So we need to think about these new emerging content and data types. So let's just wrap up with a few recommendations. First, we believe that the generational war in terms of the architecture and the way that we think about content management has changed. The old on-premises architected suites of the past have largely given way to the modern content platforms that we see organizations adopting and planning to adopt this year and into next. We know that we're increasingly interested in serving customers with low-code and no-code development and design platforms. So they can very easily tailor those content platforms to serve the applications to the users that need them. Be very targeted. The HR team needs employee file management. The customer-facing team needs knowledge management. We need to be able to manage our health and safety documentation. So there's a whole range of use cases as we look at sector to sector, but we need the flexibility to serve any number of these use cases and the workers that rely upon them. As we look into 2021, we also know that there's a big influx of these intelligent content services coming into the content platform stacks from many vendors. So we need to start thinking about where there's practical AI use cases that will help us solve some of the lingering problems of the last number of years. Second recommendation is to also take another look at your business case. It may be time to modernize that as well. The requirements and the assumptions you had 5 years ago may no longer be as relevant. So rethink the business case as your company priorities have changed, and perhaps your maturity levels around technology and digital business have also changed. Also make sure that this business case for content management modernization is directly aligned to your top corporate priorities. So understand, what does that mean? Does that mean revenue growth? Does that mean cost reduction? Does that mean better customer experience? Make sure there's a synchronization there. Think about more of an agile way of deploying the technologies. Where can you deploy something quickly, get the quick win, continue to get that executive support for ongoing work and budget. Be clear about performance metrics. Understand, where are you solving real world practical problems that are barriers to business productivity? And how do you measure those desired outcomes? Is it a faster path to revenue? Is it cost reduction? Is it a more engaged and happy workforce? These are all things that will differ from organization to organization. And of course, plan for change and plan for continuous improvement. Always watch the user behaviors, use data where you can, and feed that back into your roadmap. So your business case can always be kept evergreen and fresh. And the final recommendation is, as you start thinking about modernization of the technology, of the business case, also make sure you're thinking about the success measurements that matter the most. How do you understand where you're making an improvement? Is it about user productivity? Is it about a faster path to revenue? Is it about increasing customer satisfaction if it's a client-facing use case? Is it about better use of your assets? Or have you perhaps needed to fill some compliance gaps? Perhaps there was an audit that was failed, so you need to get more structure around the governance of content. Again, different organizations will have different requirements, So these are some of the examples of the measurements you can choose from. And with that, I'll turn it back to our hosts.
Thank you, Cheryl. This was truly insightful, and a modern content services platform looks like the way to go for enterprises to accomplish their digital transformation goals. And now, I invite Anurag to give us a glimpse into how Newgen is aiding this modernization motion. Anurag.
Thank you, Gunjan. Uh, Good morning, everyone. That was a great insight from Cheryl on the ECM modernization and the key reasons why enterprises are looking to modernize and migrate. So I'm going to talk about the approach from the solution and the customer perspective. So let's move ahead. So the market expectations from a content management system have changed. So I'm going to talk about what it used to be traditionally and what is that the modern content services platform, the expectations from modern content services platforms are. So the focus has shifted from managing the content to utilization of content. Traditionally, content was all about where it is stored, documents, what are the metadata, how do I search, and those kind of things. Now, the expectation is about what the actual content is. What is the context of the content? How it is utilized? Am I being able to use it in the context of the process, in the context of the customer engagement? If I'm doing certain work on the business side, do I get the relevant content which is required in that context? So that's the expectation which is today. The human to the human to AI and ML based transformation has really proliferated. Today, I don't have to look at the email or the document to know the content and the context. I can train these AI ML services to do that for me. Content auto classification is one such example. The AI ML based services can not only identify the document types, but also it can intelligently index for future presentment within the context, the contextual presentments. For example, if let's say there is a tax return submitted by the customer via email or portal or any other channel or medium, and there is a loan in process, let's say it's a financial services organization and there is a loan already in process. So not only the document is identified as tax return automatically, but it is also tagged with the loan transaction in process and presented to the relevant user, whether it is underwriting or credit and so on and so forth. So that's the kind of transition that we are seeing. And world has moved from paper documents to electronic and digital content, and especially living through the COVID year, more and more business transactions are being conducted through audio video channels, Teams, Zoom, WebEx. All of these have proliferated into the day-to-day business, the way businesses are working, and decisions are being made in such meetings, and organizations are recording these audio video meetings. So it is becoming increasingly critical to be able to search such content from archives. So that's where the content has moved from the traditional paper-based documents. And the linear workflows, those have transitioned into more collaborated processes. Not only employees and inter-department users, but also the external entities like agents, service providers, attorneys, your partners. All of these entities are participating into the process. And the repository of content is no longer a single archive. The repositories are scattered. Those are federated in multiple locations. You have file share, you have shared drives, email archives, databases, social archives. So today the expectation is the seamless search through these varied repositories and presenting uniform and consistent output to the user. The architecture has evolved from monolithic and self-contained to more modular and service-based. Microservices, Dockers, Kubernetes, all of these have transformed the way content services are managed and utilized. And adoption to cloud, we all know, I mean, for new deployments as well as migration of on-premise applications. So what we used to call enterprise content management now have transformed collectively into content services platform. So if we look at the modern content services platform expectations from the last slide, all of those points, we see 4 distinct areas of investment. Digital workplace with pervasive use of content, I mean, through cloud and hybrid deployments across federated repositories. Content in context, we talked about that, irrespective of the form of content, be it paper, electronic, email, social, audio, video. To be able to present the content in the context of engagement is one of the key area that organizations are looking at. Content intelligence is another one. We talked about auto classification, searching through audio and video and other content types consistently, adhering to regulatory compliances, whether it is insurance industry requiring SEC 17A4 for immutable warm storage of the customer artifacts, or PCI DSS for payments in financial services, or HIPAA in healthcare, or GDPR. All these must be complied with, and in all forms of content, not only limited to a document. All such audio, video, in all such kinds of content, you must be able to adhere to the regulatory compliances. So now, digital transformation initiatives, they are going beyond platform modernization. If you look at the business initiatives, what they are looking at, IT transformation and modernization is certainly at the top, but as just one of the initiatives, there are other goals: rapid application development, improving customer and employees experience, making it frictionless. That's the big one. Information security, scalable, highly available, remote working, enabling remote working, remote access, all of those things. So to achieve these initiatives, what you really need? You need a platform with modern content services and workflow, which supports low-code application development, which gives you all those tools and capabilities for improving your customer and employee experiences, be it portal, be it collaboration, self-service, back-office processing, all of those things. And on top of it, if you add content analytics, intelligence, to make it more relevant, more hyper-automation, deploying on cloud or hybrid, including microservices architecture, DevSecOps, emphasizing the need to build a security foundation within DevOps, web services, open APIs. So continuous enrichment of integration catalogs, more and more standard and out-of-the-box integration adapters. So all of these in a single and unified digital automation platform. So not just solve for your IT transformation and rapid app dev, but also your customer and employees experience needs. So that's what we are looking to solve for. So now introducing Newgen digital automation platform, which has a layer for core content services at the bottom with communication services, business process automation on top of it, and low-code application development environment on top of it. All your leading edge technologies and capabilities like AI, ML, RPA, robotic process automation, analytics, and both for processes as well as for content. All of these technologies sitting on top of these platform and layers. And then you have this multi-experience user interface, right? where you are able to design all of those user personas, whether it is your internal employees, your external. So all of these will allow you to configure and develop those business applications that cater to the use cases for employees who are internal, customers who are external, partners, again externals, and those partners could be, we talked about attorneys, agents, service providers, all of those, including customers, of course. And of course, so with integrated ecosystem and on cloud, the left and right that you see. So this is really the stack. I mean, a unified platform that is cloud hosted, a single platform, scalable, extensible, secured, highly available, and at the same time auditable, with data governance, capable of delivering deep insights and analytics, used by the enterprises. This kind of platform is used by the enterprises to rapidly develop and deploy complex and critical business applications, perform millions of transactions, handle billions of documents, and enable remote access to hundreds and thousands of employees. So that's the digital automation platform that Newgen brings in. To go a level deeper in the content services capability of Newgen digital automation platform, just a little bit deep. If you look at capture is not only scanning or email fax ingestion or just integration with portal and social today. It is also about analyzing the quality of the documents and take that human intervention away by assigning those threshold parameters and rule-based judgment, and determining that yes, this content is good to be included into the process, to be presented to the user. We are talking about intelligent extraction, for example, legend-based data extraction from invoices, tax forms, identification cards, and documents, and using these extraction outputs for smart indexing. And when you move to process, Cheryl talked about content microprocesses. Just expounding on that, the auto classification using artificial intelligence, machine learning, active script-based automation for content structuring and presentment, analytics, RPA, collaboration within organization, inter as well as intra-department employees, bringing in external participants, partners, service providers, customers. And moving forward on the store, if you look at store, it is no longer just a traditional archive. We are talking about management of content, discovery across federated repositories. We talked about security and compliances, SEC 17A4 for insurance, PCI DSS for financial services, HIPAA for healthcare, GDPR, and many more. And of course, to combine this with the record management, which is Department of Defense certified and complied, which allows you to define the life cycle, retention, destruction, legal hold, suspension, all of those things. And again, across the forms of the content, these are no longer limited to just the documents and the scanned files. Remote imaging, cloud and hybrid repositories, of course, we talked about that. If you look at the extension, right, extending the platform to configure and develop industry applications as well as productivity applications. All user applications, so content enabling all your user applications. So some traditionally in older days we used to call it image enabling of a business application. So instead of image enabling, we are now calling it content enabling. It is no longer just a document which may be required to be presented while a user is working on a third-party business application. It could be any form of content. It could be audio, it could be video, it could be document, it could be email, anything. And of course, microservices we talked about, customer communication we talked about. So all of these to provide those that transformed experiences across the channel of engagement. If you look at on the top, paper or paper converted into a scanned file, social, portal, email, mobile, audio, video mediums. So all of those things. Let's go to next. So this platform essentially is being used in multiple industries with enterprise-wide use cases. And Newgen platform has been used in these multiple industries. So whether we are looking at servicing the customers through, let's say, contact center, or through your back office or middle office, or any other forms of engagement, whether it is a credit limit update into a bank or credit union, or there is a policy related servicing, or there are complaints or queries, or let's say it's a manufacturing or telecom or carrier where there is equipment installation. So all of such needs where you are servicing your customers or you are supporting your partners, right? So for example, in a shared service organization, if there are invoice related requests, if there are goods related transactions, if there are returns, or if there are delays, or there are coupon reimbursements, all of those things, there you are working with your partners, and those external partners, how you collaborate with them, it becomes very important and integral to your content services platform. How do you respond to your vendors? Your vendors are submitting the invoices. How do you process those? How do you communicate back to your vendors on the payments, on time, delayed, exceptions? If there are any change in the vendor details, how do you manage that? Managing your subcontractors, taking care of your duplicate PO requests, those kind of things. And of course, your internal employees. The content services platform should also include your employees' internal experience right from the day the employee gets onboarded into your organization to the ongoing activities like regular expense reimbursements, your appraisals, goal settings, trainings, rewards, recognitions. All of those things will require this content services. And when you look at from the line of business perspective, right? What are those? We talked about business applications and productivity applications. So productivity applications we discussed in the previous slide. If you look at the business applications, so those domain-rich accelerators, right? Whether it is banking, insurance, government, we just picked 3 or 4 here as indicative representation, but the content services, this platform really goes across the verticals. And if I just have to take maybe a couple of real life world example, in one of the insurance company, there was this challenge that they were facing, where there were a huge group of lawyers, attorneys who were working, who work on these large claims, litigations, class action suites, and those kind of things, which runs into months and years. That's the kind of life cycle of these claims. And over a lifetime of a claim, it would accumulate 500 to 1,000 pages. And they would use a folder in a physical world to keep those all 500,000 pages. They would make those annotations. They would use those post-its. So if you look at one such physical file, there would be hundreds of post-its sticking out to indicate that, okay, there are annotations and there are notes. And then when you open the folder, on the inside cover of the folder, there would be multiple activity sheets, something like table of content, where date-wise the lawyers and various other users would have noted or annotated that what work they did on what page, what section. To transform this entire experience digitally, not only just the scanning the documents, but to allow these lawyers to be able to annotate digitally, put notes, making it secured, what can be shared with others, what are private, being able to search through those notes. There could be multiple documents into one folder. There could be hundreds of notes across the documents, giving that aggregated view, and then allowing the lawyers to quickly select one note and jump to the relevant page of, let's say, if it is page number 300 or 400 or wherever it is, instead of browsing through those 400, 500 or 1,000 pages. So this entire transformation of cultural work and moving from physical to digital was so impactful in that implementation, which one of our partner did for this one of a big insurance company within US. So that was one example. Looking at time, I may also take just one more where there was this customer service request management automation where hundreds of request types and workflows were automated with the across the channels of the content being ingested. There could be customers, there could be agents who would send in those requests. Those would come in through email, fax, paper, portal, and those would go into the process where depending on the type of the request identified intelligently through extraction, through certain logic, through AI and ML, and then routing those requests to the relevant department queues and users for their processing, and also allowing certain straight-through processing in that use case. So I'm almost reaching towards the end of my presentation. This is just a high-level recognition of the platform, Newgen platform, by the Forrester and the Gartner on all the aspects of the product components that we discussed just now. So that concludes my presentation. Back to you, Gunjan, and if there are any questions, I'm happy to take those along with Cheryl.
Thank you, Anurag. That was a wonderful overview of Newgen and its offerings as well. So we do have some questions over here. Let me take them up one by one. Okay, so this is for Anurag. The first question we have is, we have files, emails, physical documents across the organization in several different places. Is it possible to consolidate them all with a content services system?
Yeah, you're able to hear me fine, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's a classical problem, and Cheryl talked about it. I kind of touched upon it during my earlier presentation. So there are a couple of ways we have solved it for few of our customers, and certain other enterprise customers are looking at it. One is obviously you could consolidate everything into a modern enterprise content management or content services platform, however you call it. That's one way to do it. You can do the migration. Several of our customers have done that, from legacy document management system to file shares to drives and all of those things they have consolidated. The other way to look at it, if because day one you may not be able to bring everything into the repository, so you may also want to look at federated content management in a sense that if the content service can crawl into these different places, if there are emails archives, let's say Exchange or certain databases, if one of the microservice of content platform can crawl into that, if you have got drives and file shares, if it can crawl into that, bring all of those, create a search mechanism and facilitate searching seamlessly across these, and bring those outputs consistently for the users in the context of the engagement or the process the user is doing. That could be a way to start your consolidation, and then as you go along, you slowly and gradually bring the content, migrate the content, and do away with those federated places. So there could be two ways to do about it.
Thank you, Anurag. Another question is, what is the average time taken to migrate from an existing ECM system?
Well, so foremost, it will certainly depend on the volume, but more than volume, it also depends a lot on how intelligently it is archived into your current document management system, wherever it is archived. What kind of taxonomy you have, what kind of structure you have. So if you have a good taxonomy already in place, then it could be very quick. Our customers have migrated in the tunes of terabytes, multiple tens and hundreds of terabytes, millions and millions of documents in space of, let's say, 8 weeks, 12 weeks. Also, if the repository is large and there are certain processing logic which requires to be combined with the migration, so that the content, when it moves in the new repository, it becomes intelligent and you are able to apply AI, ML, RPA, all of those kind of things in future when those content are required to be used in the context of whatever process you are going to do. So in those cases, it could be a little bit more, maybe 6 months over a period of uh, over a repository of several terabytes, tens of terabytes, hundreds of terabytes. So the time really will depend on the source, not much on destination, but the source and the form in which it is currently in the source.
Thank you, Anurag. Another question that we have from the audience is, what is the market share available in 2021?
Uh, when you say market share, this is for the enterprise content management?
They've just typed it as such. I think it is so.
Yeah, I mean, Cheryl talked about it. She mentioned about 6 billion and the couple of parameters which constitute that. So from the traditional way of thinking, the market share of content management was all about the document, the volume of document, the volume of scanned archives, and how big or small is the repository across the overall market. But today that has become insignificant. I'm not insignificant, but that has become that has kind of expanded into multiple forms. So this webinar, we are recording this webinar. This becomes a content, and then somebody may make a copy of it and may want to use it somewhere. Similarly, Cheryl talked about recording meetings, making those decisions into the meetings, and then there are email archives. There are so the overall content space has expanded and proliferated in so many different ways that the overall market for content, if we see it, it could like Cheryl mentioned, 6 billion is one of the figure that we can look at.
Perfect. Hope that answers the question as well. Next question is, does your repository support multimedia content and social records?
Yes, and Newgen content services platform certainly supports that, and it not only supports archiving and recording all of this, it also allows you to live stream. So irrespective of the size of the audio or video or rich multimedia content that are archived into the repository, when a user, be it internal employee or external customer or your partner or your agent, through the portal or through mobile app, irrespective of the channel or the user persona, the live streaming of the entire content is enabled through separate through varied devices. So yes, we do that.
Perfect. Here's a question on, is AI ML important in an eSIM system?
Oh yes, I mean, this has almost become one of the core capabilities. Cheryl really emphasized a lot on this, and I took an example. Cheryl also took an example of smart indexing and searching through the content of not only scanned documents but also the recordings and audios and videos. So I took an example of auto classification, uh, extraction, and smart indexing. Like if there are documents coming in, which are your tax return forms, right? Which are your ID cards? What are your invoices? So if you are able to employ these leading technologies on the content and do those analysis, it could really free up a lot of human time and make your users intelligent and information worker instead of the uh, old time of doing looking at the content, doing the indexing, tagging it, and then making it ready for usage. All of those can be streamlined. Not only streamlined, all of those can be automated right from the time the content is introduced into the platform. So yes, it has become a core component of any modern content services platform.
Thank you, Anurag. And in the interest of time, we'll just take a couple of questions more. Uh, First is, can an ECM platform coexist with other systems easily?
Yes, and that's the very nature of the ECM platform. ECM platform, by itself, will serve certain purposes, but it really and truly works with your line of business applications. If you are a bank and if you're processing a loan, if you're opening an account, if you're doing a trade finance, letter of credit, there are content which the content services platform is enabling. I talked about image enablement, what we used to call in old days, and now we are calling it content enabling these business applications. So the content is coming in from those and enabling the users, the information workers, the case workers, the knowledge workers of these business applications to be able to make the entire process digital. And same goes in, let's say, manufacturing companies. If you are processing an invoice or for the payment, or if you are in an insurance company, if you are, let's say, processing a policy change, policy reinstatement, contributions, all of those things. So really and truly, irrespective of whichever vertical you think of, the content must enable your line of business application, and it should be seamlessly presented to the user, whether it is your internal processing users or your external partners. Let's say if the vendor has submitted an invoice, and Cheryl talked about where am I into the process, the journey, step 1, step 5. I have submitted my invoice. When I'm going to get paid, is the invoice already processed within the organization? The internal process could be complex. Still talked about that, but the external partners may not have that visibility. So this entire content enabling the business application, ERP, SAP, all of those things really makes it integral to the platform.
Thank you, Anurag. And we'll just take up one final question over here. How do you see ECM modernization and the low code, no code enterprise application development and deployment trend play together?
Yes, I mean this is one of the latest one, and Cheryl talked about it. She called it microprocesses in one of her slides. And more and more as we move ahead, and living through the COVID 2020 also made it much more apparent and significant. The content is no longer just the content. The content is getting morphed into the process or the context in which the content is being used. So if, let's say, a customer in a bank or credit union is submitting an application form and an ID document, it is no longer considered or viewed or taken as a standalone content services. It must be processed in the context of, let's say, if the customer is trying to open an account. So opening an account requires certain steps. Cheryl took an example of employee onboarding. So these are the processes which requires certain steps to be performed. Few steps would be done by the customers who are submitting those forms and the documents. Certain steps may be automated, like your ID verification, ID authentication in case of account opening, let's say a fraud check, and all of those things. and then certain steps to be done by, let's say, internal processing operations or contact center users who are looking at these, working in those business applications and taking care of these requests. So so the content, the low code, no code, all of these things are getting morphed into one single platform, which enables the entire processing in the context with the content which are required for that processing. Same thing goes in a contact center, or same thing goes in a, let's say, request management system. I took an example of that. It is one of a global bank where more than 600 different types of requests have been automated, and those requests come in all shapes and forms. The documents, somebody could call a contact center, somebody could send an email, somebody could just take a picture of a form, or somebody could just go on a portal, fill the form that I want to do this, I want to make this change in my account or on my credit card. The customer could hold multiple relationship with the bank, deposit relation, credit card, loans. And when the customer is sending those requests, these requests could be in relating and impacting multiple of these lines, and multiple of these business lines. And there could be different teams internally, how the bank is structured, in which these requests must be routed intelligently, without any human intervention, as quickly as possible. There could be certain requests which are straight through process without any human touch. How do you combine all of these things, and then, of course, the content which came from the customer, and then present it back to the customer that you requested for these 5 things, 2 are done, 3 are in process, one of it will be done tomorrow, and the couple of other things will be done day after. So that kind of entire transparent digital experience for your customers, including your internal employees, all of these, if you look at it from the outset, this entire no code, low code, content services, AI, ML, these technologies, the multiple user persona, user experience, all of those things, all of these components are contained within the platform that enterprises are looking to use for.
Wonderfully answered. Thank you, Anurag. Uh, Thank you, Cheryl, Anurag, both of you. We really appreciate your time and valuable insights. Newgen will send across a copy of the recording to all the registrants. Those who were not able to share the questions today, please feel free to send them over via email. Thank you again, and have a great rest of the day ahead.